that's the best way of being able to wing it. Okay. Okay, my timing on.
Okay. Welcome to the storytelling session. My name is Deborah Altus, and I'm the chair of this session, and I want to warmly welcome you to the first session of our Friday of the conference. Our session is being led by Jan Bang and Anton Marks, and I will provide short introductions of them and then turn it over to them. So Jan grew up in England, and he's lived for 25 years in kibbutz and Camp Hill communities in Israel and Norway. He's worked with the Global Eco-Village Network since the ICSA conference at Findhorn in 1995. He's been active in the Norwegian permaculture and eco-village movements since 2001. He's been connected to the International Communal Studies Association since its founding conference in 1995, and in 2010 was elected chair of the association. He's written 7 books about community and environment. Anton Marks is the general secretary of the International Communities Desk and editor of its Hebrew and English publications, KOL and Call, respectively. Anton lives in Kibbutz Mishal, founded 20 years ago, the largest urban kibbutz in the world. Kibbutz Mishal is situated in Naf HaGalil in the north of Israel and has a total membership number of 75 adults and 79 children. So Jan and Anton, I'll turn things over to you.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Deborah. That was great. So storytelling is something that we have been doing since before we can remember, since before we can even have evidence of it. And I think it may be one of the oldest activities that we've had as people. We've always told stories, and it took well over 100,000, maybe 200,000 years before we started writing them down. And they form the first stories that we know, the first writings that we know. And since then, we have accrued an enormous amount of stories. But storytelling is not really about writing it down. Storytelling is a way of giving stories their own lives. We tell stories and they become the listener's story. And the listener who wants takes that story and hands it on in a slightly different manner. We would like this session to be a session where we tell stories about community, but of course it's always in the end about us. So we will have a structured way of doing this, but I would like Anton to introduce himself and any technical stuff we need to deal with. And then I think we start telling stories. Anton.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. Thanks, Deborah. I think Deborah's introduced me just great. This session, I think it's the 4th time, maybe even the 5th time that myself and Jan have run this session at the ICSA conference. It's a different format from the usual format where it demands of people to share stories that you have and share stories. I want to start with a quote. And it goes like this: "We are lonesome animals. We spend all of our life trying to be less lonesome. One of our ancient methods is to tell a story, begging the listener to say and to feel. Yes, that is the way it is, or at least that is the way I feel it. You're not as alone as you thought." That's a quote from John Steinbeck. And again, my experience of community, both within the community and telling stories about community, it adds a depth and a richness to the community experience when we can, the stories that we tell ourselves and each other about those experiences. So yeah, there's plenty of people here that have extensively written books, written stories about community, and hopefully during this session we'll have an opportunity to share some stories about community.
Right. To kick things off, maybe I'll go back to the beginning and tell you the story when I first became involved in communities. I was a young undergraduate student in 1970, and I didn't know anything about communes except that I'd read there was going to be a work week in a commune in Wales. So I took my dad's spade and a backpack and I hitchhiked to Wales. And this was deep in the Welsh mountains. And I followed the instructions, ended up in a village with an unpronounceable Welsh name, but long. And I was pointed out that I have to go up that valley, and I would find the farm at the end of the valley. It was a long valley and it was getting dark. And, you know, I was young and I'd never been there before. And I finally got to the end of the road and there was the farm. Now, it looked like a Welsh farm, but when I came around the corner, I found that one wall was missing. And in order to protect themselves from the elements, they put up plastic, see-through plastic. So you had this weird scene of looking into a house, seeing 2 floors and people moving about. And, you know, this was surprising. I haven't seen that very often. I knocked on the door, and I was then about 20 years old and very inexperienced, very young. And this guy opened the door, who was probably about 40. He seemed to me to be as old as Methuselah, ancient, with very long beard, very long hair. And he looked at me very aggressively and he says, "You're not just looking for a place to stay, are you?" And I said, "Oh, no, I just came for the work week." And we stayed there for a week. And we dug ditches on the farm's land in order to drain the fields. That was fun because lots of other people came, because the farm itself was not very functional. And there were people there from the English communes movement, which consists of, I think, about half a dozen people. And we decided that we should give them more time off. They had been producing a wonderful magazine from this farm. We said, maybe we'll move the magazine somewhere else. They can start doing farming. And we made that decision. And 6 months later, a new magazine, which looked just like the Communes magazine, appeared. It was called Pagan Times. And we realized that they spent most of their time dancing naked in the moonlight and not farming or doing magazines or anything else. So that was my first impression of communes. And I cherish it because I would say that every commune I've been to since then has been more functional.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always good to start at the bottom, even if you start at the beginning.
Fantastic. That's a great story, Anne. I also want to share a quick story as we start. I have spent many years visiting communities, as well as living communally now for 25 years. During that time, I've traveled literally around the world. ICSA conferences have happened in communities in different places around the world. And I remember one time I decided that I was going to visit a community that I'd heard about, one of the oldest communities in England, the community of Redfield. If the people in England are familiar with Redfield, I decided that I was going to go and visit them, and I was in contact with them. And I drove in one day, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he welcomed me into the to visit, and he was showing me around. He was showing me around the buildings, and showing me around with the houses. and he wanted to take me out into the fields to show me the fields and the farming and the sheep that they had. And to this day, I'm not sure whether it was a sort of an initiation. Let's show this townie what it really is to live in a rural location. But he took me out into the fields, and we went into the area where the sheep were. And when we were ready to go, he sort of said, you know, we need to hop over this wire that's keeping the sheep in this enclosure, and to go back to the building, to go back to my car and to say goodbye. So he very sprightly hops over the wire, and I extremely clumsily managed to catch my leg on the wire as I was jumping back out of the enclosure, and fell face down into the mud in the field of Redfield community. And I sort of sheepishly jumped up, sort of brushed myself down, sort of made my excuses that I had to leave. And a beautiful community, an amazing community, lovely people. But I'm still not sure to this day whether that was a test, whether that was a trick, or whether I just was extremely clumsy on my own accord. Redfield community. Okay, we're going to start, Jan.
Yeah. I actually remember when Redfield started. You know, that puts me back there with the Methuselahs of the commune scene there.
The 70s, maybe.
Yeah. It was. I remember it was great community actually. It still is.
Yeah, still there.
Yes. So, do you want to put the first slide up?
I do. I'd love to.
While you're doing that, I invite people to have a look at. You have to go down one, I think. That's number 2 we want. That's the one. Yes. So here we have 5 ordinary places that most communes will have. And we have 5 emotions that I'm sure we all have had. And I invite you to spend a few moments looking through them and seeing if you can link one of these emotions to one of these places and tell a story where you experienced one of these emotions in one of those places.
And clearly, it's appropriate for those that have visited communities, spent any time in communities at all. We're happy for you to share a story.
And if you come across something, just put your hand up and we will spotlight you and give you time to tell your story. Michael, maybe you could introduce yourself before you start your story.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
All right. Am I coming through? You guys hear me? Am I audible here?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go for it.
All right, great. Well, you know, the frustration at the community workplace, in my particular community. Oh yeah, I live on a farm. I'm one of the original founders in 1971. Caravan around the country, 1970. On the farm and allied smaller projects till 2000. Left in 2000. Went out to California. Got my PhD in sociology from UC Davis, and back here in Tennessee from 2018 on the farm. Teach college at the local community college, and my frustration came from when the farm was huge, and I was working. I was a farmer. I was on the farming crew. All I wanted to do was farm, get out in the field, you know, because I grew up in New York City, New Jersey, small town. Really wanted to be out in the fields, and so we had a really nice farming crew going for a few years, but we got way too big in 1976, believe it or not, that far ago. And I'd been at a smaller farm in Wisconsin, one of our satellite farms, and come back in '76 and was put in charge of the field crews, which is first the greenhouse raising all the plants, thousands and thousands, and then the fields, planting, hoeing, taking care of, labor. Most of the labor was visitors. We had a few of us farmies who were managing it. And we just got way too big, way too fast. And this is all in my forthcoming book on farm history, which will start at the beginning and go up till now, really. I think it's going to be called, the working title is Report Back Dispatches from 50 Years in Community. But, having to manage a large crew at a large operation where I knew we were it was overdone. We were overcommitted, and trying to tell the rest of the crew, hey guys, we gotta chill, we gotta slow down a little bit, not quit planting too much, that kind of thing. And it was like stepping in front of a freight train, So we recently, almost 50 years later, had a reunion of some of the people who were majorly involved back there in the 1970s, and went back over this stuff and pretty well came to agreement that, yeah, here's what happened. And basically what happened was the farming crew as a small group was successful, but the community itself had an open gate and was just taking on everybody and growing so fast we couldn't keep up with it. So we decided we had to expand and get out and try and, instead of growing food for the community and being rewarded from the community, we had to grow the food and give it to the community and not get any money back to like prepare for the next year. So we thought we'll get into commercial farming and earn our own money and not depend on the rest of the community. And, think about how few farmers there are now compared to what there were back then. And you realize what happened. That was the era of farmers getting bigger and bigger and then crashing. Mm-hmm. And all the, tractor caravans to Washington, D.C. It happened in the 80s and all that. And what came out of that was Farm Aid, which goes on every year to help farmers, Willie Nelson and others. In that case, that was my frustration, was trying to manage something that was totally unmanageable and not getting any take on it from the rest of the community. Thanks.
Great. Vincent, you've got a story. Thanks, Michael.
Yes, so I've got a story about two different areas, the bedroom and the bathroom, but it's both connected with the same group of people. So my name's Vincent Reynolds, and I'm based in the Camphill community, Glencraig in Northern Ireland. And I've been here for 40 years, since 1983. And when I came first to Glencraig, I worked with adults and I worked in the garden, and it was really lovely. Yeah. So in the second year, I sort of was given a bit more of a challenge to work with adolescents, but I could still work doing land projects. So it was a bit more challenging than working with the adults. But then in the third year, I had a group of children to look after, which is called a dormitory in Glencraig, and in Camphill, that's what it was called in those days. It's not called that anymore. But I had a group of 4 boys to look after. One was very severely autistic, who didn't speak and had a lot of challenging behavior. There was another person with Down syndrome who also didn't speak and he wasn't able to walk. And then there was 2 other boys who were a bit more capable. One was very challenging. Well, they were both challenging. But one of the stories I want to share is that there was one weekend where I'd been away, and we had chickens outside the house, which, my group, we looked after the chickens every day. We fed them and collected the eggs and that. So I was away for this weekend, and I came back and one of the chickens had been killed. Somebody had jumped out the window, taken the chicken, brought it into the bedroom and tried to get the chicken to fly in the bedroom. But the bedroom ceiling was very low, so the chicken unfortunately died. Yeah. So I came back, I was told what happened. So I went into the room and I said, right, what happened? And one of the guys who could speak said, It was Wilson, England, and he was the person with Down syndrome who couldn't speak and he couldn't walk. So he wasn't able to speak up to himself, but he just had this look and speak that, like it wasn't me, yeah. But yeah, and I also like to share a story from looking after these boys in the bathroom. So every Saturday night, like they would have a bath. So you can imagine giving a bath to 4 people. Yeah, so there was just one bathroom, so they took it in turn. Sometimes you had 2 people in the bathroom at the same time, one in the bath and one you're drying. Yeah, like nowadays it wouldn't be allowed. It would be considered, like an abusive situation. But I just remember how frustrating this was. And, like you'd have like the temperature, it was very hot, and like somebody might also be starting to walk around the house naked and all sorts of things going on. And I just sort of said to myself, I really have to learn to control my temper, because otherwise I'm going to kill somebody and I'm going to get into a lot of trouble. Yes. So there was this sort of feeling of frustration and, like, what can I do with this situation? Yeah. Yeah. I didn't kill any of them. I felt like doing it sometimes, but I didn't. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. David?
Great, thank you. Yeah, the list you put up, kind of, I saw the word dining hall, and that immediately kind of conjured kind of memories for me. I mean, I grew up in a very kind of conventional, non-communal world, very middle class, suburban environment. But then I kind of dropped out of university and ran away to live on a kibbutz in Israel, up in the north, kibbutz Shamir. And the first thing that kind of struck me was the importance of the dining hall. They had this big, beautiful dining hall with this gorgeous kind of, I think, tapestry that captured the community. And it was the center for all of those emotions. You'd come and you'd eat together and you'd gossip together, and people would sit in their little cliques as well. And you'd work there. I often worked in the kitchens there as well, but I remember especially it would be also transformed for community events. It was a transformed the General Assembly. We were volunteers. We never did that. But for the Festival of Purim, which I'd never kind of known much about, they invited us all there. We were told that this was a chance to kind of I don't know, loosen up, and we were all invited to do performances. So a group of volunteers, including myself, decided to do a dance performance of Swan Lake. We used material from their fabric factory, and we created these elaborate costumes and pink tutus and little feathers on our heads, and we were kind of naked from the waist up, these 5 male volunteers. And at this performance where the kibbutzniks, who usually never drank, were kind of completely blotted out of their mind for this one night, we danced together, and it was we had a tiny Swedish volunteer who played the baby swan, and 2 groups of other 2 volunteers were trying to kind of win his affection, but in the end we ended up pulling him apart, which I don't know was a metaphor for a community dysfunction or something. And then afterwards, one of my kibbutznik friends who had grown up there said, "Oh, that was the best performance of the night," but it was such a strange and memorable and euphoric experience. And I don't think I've done anything in public quite like that again, but just that sense of almost a safe space to do all sorts of things, both mundane and a little bit surreal in the dining hall. So I still remember that well. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Is there anybody else who has yes, that's a good idea. Put up these things to remind people an emotion and a place. See if you can link those together. That's it. Deborah, I see you have your hand up.
Sure, I can go.
For it.
So I lived in a a co-op house for a number of years with 29 other people. It was actually two very old, very rundown, three-story houses that were joined together by a common living room. And so I want to talk about frustration. We had just interminable meetings where we would get together every Monday and have a meeting, and we would argue about things. And anybody who's lived in a communal group, I'm sure, can relate to this. And we kept meeting minutes in a file cabinet, and I can remember looking in the file drawer, and the biggest file folders were for cockroaches, rats, and guests. Because we had a bad cockroach problem and we fought about it constantly on how to deal with it. And we had rats, and we had some people who wanted to poison the rats and some people who wanted to use live rat traps because you should never kill a rat. And we would have endless arguments about the rats. And guests were another huge one, because people would let their boyfriend or girlfriend or other people come move in with them, and they wouldn't participate in the work sharing or contribute financially and just freeload. And so that was also a huge problem that we would talk about for hours. And so, there were times when I thought, this is it. I just can't do this anymore. And I think the lowest point was when one time we were arguing about the fact that the neighborhood association in the neighborhood we lived in wanted us to put a sign in our yard that welcomed people to the neighborhood, just temporarily. and people didn't want to do it because they thought it was too political. And I almost couldn't bear it at that point. I was about ready to pack, my stuff and leave. But, I stuck around, and I'm so glad I did, because I have the most wonderful memories of meals together, the dining hall, like David was talking about, such an important place, parties, just wonderful relationships with people that I still have to this day. So I'm very grateful that I didn't give up, even though the meetings could be pretty horrendous.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great. Yeah, stories of these early attempts at community. It was full. It was a time of magic, but it was full of great stories. Yes, anybody else? If you think something, put your hand up or send me a chat.
Yuval's got his hand up.
Ah, great. Luval, you have
You
to
need to
unmute
unmute yourself.
and we'll put the searchlight on you. The spotlight.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, good. Yeah, I'm having trouble figuring out what emotion or emotions. So maybe if I tell the story, the emotion will come, and then we can figure out which one it is, or which ones. Maybe there's several. So I was at this community. It was more of an eco village in California that was started by this ex engineer. He used to make helicopters. I forget, for Boeing or one of these big companies. And this community was in Northern California. And he decided, for various reasons, that the world is going to hell and we better do something about it. So he started this community with his son, who is very different, more of an artsy guy, airy-fairy guy, very creative, but not an engineer for sure. And also the other interesting thing is this guy knew the guy who was charged with shooting Kennedy, or assassinating Kennedy. I forget his name, but anyway, he knew him and had let him store the weapon in his garage. I never found out more than that, but there was some intrigue with that. Anyway, he was an interesting guy. He invested a lot of money in a workshop that he had stocked with all kinds of fancy machining tools, milling, machining tools. And he had this idea. He had lots of ideas, actually. He considered himself an inventor. But one of his ideas was that instead of using ice from winter in the summer to store it in an ice house, just like the Amish do and like people used to do, we could do the reverse, which is we could store heat that's produced from sunlight in the summer, and then store it in an insulated container that also has some fluid flowing through it. So it can be used for heating and maybe cooking in the winter. And his son somehow got my attention. I guess I was looking for a community at the time, and he found me to work on this. And I have fond memories of doing it. First I did a simulation, and or more like a computation, and it turns out that in theory this is quite possible. And then I tried to implement it, and I just remembered it was a lot of fun because I mean, I actually didn't end up using the machining tools very much. I used things like a potter's wheel, because one of the things we try to do is to just make a paraboloid mirror out of, the first part was clay, then we added all kinds of coatings to it, and but you know, I had to find someone, Nico the potter in the community, who had this potter's wheel, and then yeah, I contacted all kinds of other people who are good at making telescope mirrors, not in the community, this was outside, but they had all kinds of ideas. So we experimented with a whole bunch of things, there was the community, there was also the community workshop, which was a different place that didn't have all the fancy tools, but it had some good tools. And so I was working there. And other things were done there. There were people using it to make spoons or to build tiny houses. It was just a fun place to be, very, very creative and productive. And in the end, it turns out I did not have the technical capability. It required too much precision to implement his idea, which I didn't say much about, but there has to be a focusing with a very large focal length of solar light into this insulated container, and the insulated container has a tiny aperture. Anyway, any kind of movement from the wind or cars far away could make this thing miss. And anyway, I mean, I got pretty close, but in the end I figured there's too much manufacturing precision that was required, and I couldn't quite do it with the tools that I had. But I definitely enjoyed being there and working on that project. And there were a few other people who were involved, including Michael, the founder. Anyway, I just have fond memories of the teamwork and goodwill. I mean, Michael was a frustrating guy because he kept changing what he wanted, and he had a very different vision, I think, than everybody else. Not the technical part, but what he wanted like one big factory for the community. And everybody else was thinking, no, we're not going to compete with China. That's not. So he had a very socialist kind of vision. Anyway, that's so what feelings? I guess just satisfaction and I mean, love. I mean, you could say love is in the Khalil Gibran sense of what was it? Love made manifest is work, right? So that was it.
Right.
It was
Thank you.
It was very satisfying work. Even though we didn't achieve the final goal, I still enjoyed the process a lot.
Thank you for sharing, Luval. Thank you. Is there anybody else out there who would like to share something?
Otherwise, we can move to the next method.
Yeah.
Alright,
Here's
yeah.
some. Yep. You want to say something, Anton?
No, go for it.
These are the beginnings of a sentence, the beginnings of the story. If you look through, read them through and see if there is something that you would like to say that starts with this half sentence. And it's good. This session is storytelling, but in between the stories, we can also have a little silence when we think about what story we want to tell.
Let's give it another 20 seconds and then we can start asking for stories.
Right. Vincent.
Okay, so a moment I realized I was in the right place. When I was a child, I grew up in Dublin. And when I was a child, I sort of could imagine myself living anywhere in the world, New Zealand, America, anywhere. But there was one place where I wasn't going to live, and that was Northern Ireland. And this was during the 1960s, where the Troubles hadn't even started at that time, but there was something about Northern Ireland. It was sort of called the Black North. Yeah, you know, it's not the sort of place where you would go to live, even before, as I say, the Troubles. Yeah. So then, you know, like in 1983, you know, through various things I was doing, I found my way to Glencraig. And I always remember when I arrived first, there's this long drive at Glencraig, you know, like through a woodland, you know, beautiful walk. And I was walking down this drive and I met this person who was really very friendly. He was from South America and he was asking me my name. And I thought, wow, you know, like such a friendly person. And then I walked down a bit further and I came across this man and I said hello to him and I thought he'd also be very friendly. But he just walked by and I don't think he even recognized who he was. Now, he wasn't one of the residents at Glencraig. He was an elderly man and, you know, like must have been preoccupied with things. But I remember just having this reaction. What a place this is. You know, you meet this person who's so friendly and the next person, you know, like they hardly know you exist. Yeah. So I was staying for the weekend and I was studying in the Botanic Gardens in Dublin at that time, horticulture. And it was a 2-year course. So I was in the first year and I was going to do 2 years, but I couldn't sleep that night. And I sort of thought, this is where I want to be. And the next day I had a conversation with the farmer and I said to him, you know, I was going to do my course and, you know, get involved in horticultural therapy. But now I know, like, there's no point doing that. I can learn so much from being here in Glencraig. And I thought, you know, like this is a bit of a hippie community where, you know, like people dropping out of college, you know, like that's, or, you know, it's not going to be a problem. But he said to me, no, you have to do your course. And then if you really want to, you can come. And it was a real shock. Yeah. But it was sort of such an experience then of doing this course. And, you know, most of the time I was very positive about wanting to come. But then just before I was coming, I had some doubts. And it was good to go through that experience. And I've been here ever since 1983. And it's always felt to me like home. And even now, where there's a lot of changes in Camphill, I still feel it's very much my home.
Thank you, Vincent. That's a great story about coming to Camp Hill. There's so many stories about coming to community. Wonderful. David has his hand up. David, the spotlight is yours.
Right. Yeah, just briefly, I reacted immediately to that. I think that first line, the most angry I've been. And I don't know if there's one moment, but kind of a recurring moment, the most angry I've been is typically when I log onto social media and Twitter and Facebook and find myself kind of fighting with people who are in my larger community. The worst reaction I tend to get are on these community, neighborhood, social media groups, which have this kind of vision of bringing us all together, but the way their kind of algorithms seem to work, even for somebody like me who kind of studies them and studies community, I find myself kind of like arguing about bike lanes and the need for this and why can't we kind of support housing, and people going back and forth until they're just shouting at each other, and my blood pressure goes up, and I find myself kind of looking around and thinking, do I really like the people around me? And then I go and walk my dog and say hi to my neighbors and realize I live in a wonderful community, but these kind of systems of connection are in fact kind of driving us apart. So I've had to kind of pull myself back from them and put limits so I can only log on a certain amount of times, and I'm very tempted to delete them entirely so I can kind of just reconnect in a physical level. But at the same time, the silver lining, I come to a place like this where you've kind of organized a virtual community online that actually does feel intentional and authentic. So I don't know if I need to live with that anger or kind of let it go, but to live more intentionally in these virtual spaces so they don't kind of affect my life in the real world.
Thank you, David. That's anybody else are triggered? Maybe Anton, can you put up the sentences again? Does anybody cried in a community setting? Or does anybody think it can change the world? We're opening. Michael, I see you're waving your hand. This is a good sign.
I haven't figured out the hand raising thing, so I just raised my hand. Community can change the world. Well, I'm going to talk about some of this in my talk later, but basically we came here with 250, 300 people in 1971, and a couple years down the line, we all registered to vote. And in our sparsely populated area of Tennessee, we basically, at that point, there were 9 precincts in our town, in our county, and each precinct had 3 members of the county commission, and we could have easily elected all 3 of them. And we chose to only do 2, some of the time only 1. But unlike what the Rajneesh folks did up in Antelope, Oregon, which is take over the whole place. So we didn't want to do that because we were a spiritual community, believed in peace, and we were not going to force our will on local neighbors. And we still have really good relations with our local neighbors. And that's part of the story, is because it's a conundrum. On the one hand, we have really good relations with all the people around here. They treat us really well. We're on the tourism bulletins from the local towns. Come see the farm. It's part of our local area. All that. But politically, folks around here vote for everything we don't like. So how do we get along in that kind of an environment, and what to do about it now, when politics is becoming more and more, I watched the Helen Jarvis one from yesterday, and Cheryl Cothard, and Yuval. I think that's, politically, we can change. So anyway, we went in and voted, and the local folks are ready to throw out their old political machine. And we came in the first time we voted, we really helped them throw out the local political machine. And we've, because of our numbers and our activism, we've helped stave off a few environmental disasters in the local area by participating. And it's a longer story than that, but the fact is we have made some change. On the other hand, all we've been able to do is kind of like most movements that are enthusiastic, we make an impact, but we don't necessarily win the day or change the whole situation. But we have changed the environment in the local area quite a bit and have a lot of respect. The thing we most find the most agreement with here in Tennessee is environment. Whenever they wanted to put a dump on the Buffalo River, we came out against it. The local folks were so happy to have us on their side, and we kept that dump away. At one point, they were going to put a, believe it or not, a mercenary shooting range training ground. I mean, you know, this is like undeveloped area, and everybody wants to get in. People want to get in and grab a piece of it. So we've managed to stave off a lot of bad stuff that way just by being here. How, you know, I guess that's what I'd say just for now, that our presence here has really made a difference in this part of the United States and the world. Hard to say whether it's enough, whether there's ever enough, but just our presence here has made quite a bit of difference because we've participated. We believed in participating. It's a longer story, but you know, when anyway.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. It was great. I just want to remind everybody we have less than 15 minutes left. And if somebody wants to tell a story now, that would be wonderful. But I don't see any hands up. So, yes, this is the sentences that you can use. If you'd like to look at those, I would like to bring something else up at the session this time, that we talk now, we're telling now personal stories, but we have represented here both the kibbutz movement and the Camp Hill movement, and they are both old, long, well-established, big community movements, and they have their own stories, which is part of their culture. And I wanted to tell one of the Camp Hill stories that is part of the Camp Hill culture, that if you live in Camp Hill, you will know it. And only Vincent here lives in Camp Hill, so the rest of you probably don't. Oh, Mark, yeah, you're from Boston. That's right. So that's great. So that's two people. In order to understand this story, you have to know that on December the 13th, all Camp Hill communities, or most, celebrate Santa Lucia, which is essentially a Swedish Christian celebration. We don't need to go into the theology, but the practice is that two young ladies dress in white. One of them has a crown with lit candles. We found out that it's best to put something over your hair because the candles drip. And they go round in the middle of the night from bedroom to bedroom, giving out small sweet buns. Okay, that's how it's practiced. So now the story is that a young volunteer arrives in the evening at Camp Hill after supper, and the person that he is shown in and welcomed, and they say, look, here's a bedroom, here's the bathroom, if you can have something to eat and then go to sleep, and in the morning we'll have breakfast together and we'll show you what it is. It's a big shared house, you know, strange place, never been there before. He goes to bed, he goes to sleep, and in the middle of the night he thinks he's dead and gone to heaven, because the door opens and these two gorgeous angels dressed in white one of them with a crown of candles comes and gives him something sweet to eat. So it Vincent, you've heard the story, Mark, you've heard the story, but it's told so many times in Camp Hill, and it's a great way of showing how it might be useful not to scare people too much, to explain to them what this place is before they start there. Right. I just wanted to throw that in because there's this aspect of stories as community messages, community ways of handing on the tradition. So now I'm looking for
Yeah, and I'd like to
Anton.
I'd like to tell a story that totally reminds me of. I think maybe you've heard this story before. When I first started living communally, we lived in two adjoining apartments, like one big apartment. There was about 10 of us. And one night I was flying out back to visit my parents in England. And I woke up at like 3 in the morning to get ready and put my case in a taxi to go to the airport. And on waking up, I noticed it was fortunate that I woke up because I had in those days a clock radio, which was plugged in. And that was the only way I had of waking up. But what I noticed when I woke up was the clock radio was off. But I'd woken up at exactly the time that I needed to wake up. I don't know how that happened. And I noticed that basically there was no electricity in that part of the commune at all. And I got up and I went to the bathroom and I basically stumbled around in the dark. And I managed to find my way in there, and I was like, okay, I'm now going to leave, but maybe what I should do, because I had so much trouble finding the bathroom and you know, working out how to do what I needed to do in the dark, I would put a little nightlight candle in the bathroom. You know, that was the nice community thing to do, was to leave a little candle there, so that if anyone else woke up in the night with no electricity, they'd be able to see what they were doing. So I rummaged around and I found one of those little nightlight candles that are in those like little metal containers. And I put it on the top of the toilet. And I went and I took my case and I got in a taxi and I traveled to the airport. And I'm waiting at the airport and I'm waiting for my flight to be called. And then I hear all of a sudden on the tannoy in the airport, I had no mobile phone in those days. Anton, please call home. Please call your commune. You're wanted. You need to call them. So I found the nearest phone and I called. And as soon as the guy that I called, as soon as the guy answered the phone, I could understand that there was a level of anger, a level of fear, and a bit of shaking in his voice. And I was like, hey, what's going on? You want me to phone? I'm phoning. Here I am. What's going on? And he was like, the first thing he said to me was, Anton, you could have killed us. It was the first thing he said to me. And I was like, what's going on? He said, I woke up in the middle of the night with some smoke in my room, thick smoke in my room. And I jumped out of bed. And as I put my feet down on the floor of my bedroom was in about 2 inches of water. And it was a bit of a crazy way to be woken up in the middle of the night from smoke and then from water. And he ran out to wake everyone up, to get everyone out of the house in the middle of the night. And I've still got the photos to this day. Basically what happened was that the candle on top of the plastic toilet, the container above the toilet, basically melted all the way down until the water started flooding out and filled the whole commune with water and smoke. And I was there at the airport ready to fly out. And what I found myself saying to him was, why did you call me? What do you want me to do? I can't do anything. I'm about to get on the plane. And he was like, I wanted you to know before you got on the plane that this is what happened. And fortunately, they had all had time to calm down, because I came back, I think, a week or 10 days later. And I found when I got back, they were all shaking their heads. and pretty angry with me and upset with me. And here was me thinking that I was doing the right thing to leave them some light in the bathroom in the middle of the night.
Thank you, Anton. That's a great story. It's the stories are often great when they reveal something that you did wrong, something that makes us a bit laughable, because we need to be laughed at. I always say that you can't take anyone seriously if they can't be laughed at. And we need that in community more than other people, because community can often be very, very tight. We have time for at least one more story. So do you want to put those sentences back up, and then somebody will jump in and be inspired, that maybe you realized you were in the right place? I see. Jonathan, yes.
Hello, Jan.
Hello, Jonathan.
Jan.
See you. So
Oh.
yeah, can you spotlight? Let's see, where are you now?
Can you see me?
Yes, that's it. Good. Yes.
So I've got a wee story that thanks, Vincent. It was good to hear the accent and the revulsion as well at the initial place we grew up in. But I have a story which is that it's about us finding a sense of humor in kind of in adversity in the community. So I live in a community of about 55 people on 10 acres in Devon, South Devon, in England. And we used to have an agreement that every member of the community had to give 6 hours of labor to the community. And there are a number of tasks that qualified for the 6 hours. And it was making everybody unhappy. So we had a meeting to explore what we were going to do. And the first voice that came in the meeting was, I'm feeling judged. In fact, I've got young kids, or I'm sick, or I'm in full-time work, or any combination of the above. I just don't have 6 hours to give, and I'm feeling miserable because I'm feeling judged. The second voice was folks saying, I am giving 6 hours, but they're largely invisible. They're kind of their finances or planning or regulations, and I'm feeling judged. And the third voice was, I'm the one doing the judging and it's making me miserable. So what had been a rather tense underlying atmosphere in the community was replaced by laughing at ourselves. And we replaced the 6 hour a week allocation with an agreement, as beautifully put. It was something like, we will do what we can to support each other, to give as much as we can to the community. And I think this kind of scored this experience, this story scored in two of your questions. Like, one was what really made me, it was one of my early experiences in the community, and I thought, oh my God, I really want to be a member of this community. It really sits, it really fits. Yes. So that's my story.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to see you, Jonathan.
Yes.
Anton, do you want to wind up with something? Because our time is running out in the next couple of minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say a couple more things about the importance of stories, because we've heard stories today on this session, and it's an important way of putting ideas into the world, and that idea resonates with me a lot, and I listened intently to the stories that's been told over the past hour, and I think this is a richer space because of those stories, because they're people's first-hand experiences, specifically here of community, and I think we can all feel the experience. The smells and the tastes of those experiences are much more rich when we share them with others. So I want to thank everyone for sharing your stories, and that's me. Jan.
Yes, I want to thank everybody also for the stories. It actually occurred to me while we were talking during this session that before, when we had these sessions before, we never recorded anything. And the stories that come out here are actually stories of community. And I thought this would be a great project for somebody to collect stories from community, because we as intentional community people have a culture which is essentially different from people who live on their own. And this storytelling is part of our culture. So that was an inspiration to me. But I can't do that, I don't think now. I'm getting on too much. So anyway, I want to thank everybody. I want to invite you to the next storytelling session, which will be in July of 2025 in Lisbon. And we'll carry on. This is a ICSA tradition, is storytelling in community. And like Anton said, we've been doing it now for over a decade. And we see that this is something which needs to be carried on. So I hope to see you all in Lisbon, and I hope to see you in other places as well. Thank you for joining us. We're now ending this session.